we are going to speak now of data visualization, how we can bring new tools to marketers.
Philippe, c'est en anglais normalement.
And we have with us today at EBG, so Alex Belfort. So London was, I say, in the speaker room, like 2012 was like a big advertising for London this year, 2012. We had the games, and we'll talk about the games. We had the Jubilee, and we had the James Bond movie, who was all about London. So it was a big advertising for London. And you tell us more about the games more specifically.
Sure.
Or if you want to speak about Jubilee, but maybe you know less. And we'll do, you have a broad view on what is CRM, marketing data, and how we can bring new ideas on this topic.
Yep.
And Michael, you will bring a topic about your companies and specifically your brands. This is what we were doing now.
Sure.
So just to start, before we go into your presentation, I will start by you, Alex. What is for you the new challenge that you have to face as a marketer or as someone who will give service to marketers when it comes to transform those datas into ideas, into actions, into something that we can use? Because we have so many data, that's the topic of the day, the big datas, but what we do with it.
We had quite a significant challenge in my job, and I worked at for the London Organising Committee of the Games for the last 6 years. I left last week. When I first started the job, the senior team had very little experience in digital, very little experience in consumer anything, because some of them come from all sorts of different backgrounds. They were high-quality people, but they hadn't had direct experience of often working in a consumer business. So the challenge for me at the outset was what is digital for, which was a genuine question that they asked. And then when I started to show them what we were doing and what the outputs were and how it could help the business, when I started showing numbers or thinking about dashboards, the question would come back, well, that's very nice. And when I showed, people like me who've worked in digital media for 20 years are used to having a magic wand, because people in the room, some are a bit scared, but some will get quite excited and think, oh, this guy's going to sort out all sorts of problems. So, of course, you tend to abuse that responsibility and that privilege. But what happened with my quite incisive management team is that when I brought them numbers, they said, $1 billion this or $1 billion that, but so what? What does that compare with? And anyway, what do these numbers mean? Because if I can't act on them, I'm not interested. So it led to quite a lot of soul-searching about how we should best work. And our immediate answer to the challenge of what was digital for was that it was to help the business do what it did better, faster, or more cost efficiently. And it also gave us an opportunity to engage directly with consumers or our fans or our public to either communicate better or potentially to generate revenue, although, of course, generating revenue isn't the main purpose of an Olympic and Paralympic Games. So that was our starting point, but there were a lot of challenges in presenting that data and making that case clear, especially when the management team over the 5-year period had many other, frankly, more important things to think through. So that's probably my starting point.
What about you, Michael? Do you feel like being also the magic wand in Kraft Foods to solve a lot of issue of the company?
Well, I think first it takes more than one guy to do that. So I definitely share the same challenge or the same first objective of trying to do education and elevating the capabilities and the expertise of our marketers across the region. I mean, in Europe we have more than 800 marketers, so it's a big community to kind of train and talk to. So really the first objective is to try and make them understand the language that we talk, and we're not only geeks, but we also have potentially an impact on business, and therefore find the good word and the good language and the good posture to just make sure that they understand what we talk about, and that they understand what impact it can have on their business. And once they know that, then they focus on the key things that makes a difference. We help them track them, and also advertise their success, just to make sure that this is elevated to senior level and then investment flows behind.
What is your background, by the way, to take over those kind of responsibilities in your companies? What's your background, Alex?
I started out my career as a journalist in a print magazine. And at that time, I think my first job as a journalist was '94. The internet had just started to emerge as something that people outside computer labs were using. And I started writing a few stories about it and realized I knew as much as anyone else. So I started doing things on the internet in parallel with my journalism career. And then by the end of the 90s, moved full-time to working in internet and went from there.
Interesting. What about you, Mikael?
Before joining Kraft 3 years ago was agency side, so I've been doing more than 10 years of agency background and pretty traditional agencies where I was the digital guy. So I just feel that I'm doing more or less the same job, but in a very different way. So yeah, pretty that type of background.
Okay, so more digital, by the way, just in the same area.
Yeah, I started with my first computer at 8, and then I think my career started at that time.
So, Alex, back on the topic, can you give us some idea of the new approaches to get, and maybe we can use your support if you want.
I mean, just
on the way you can manipulate and use information, and what was your experience during the games and before the games, because this period was really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there may be more, but if I can split into sort of 3 or maybe 4 types of data that were useful to us. So before I show you the slide, first there was what data is available from your own data set internally, and we had a database of people who signed up to be involved with the games, either probably because they wanted tickets or because they wanted to volunteer. And 46,000 people signed up the month that London won the bid in July 2005. And after that, every day, about 200 people signed up without really any great incentive and no great clarity, frankly, in the process. And when I joined a year later, we worked on making that a...
Those are the volunteers.
So that was volunteers or people who just people who wanted to be involved.
Yeah.
So that database kind of grew until the point when we had 2 big sign-up events around tickets, so a pre-registration for a ticket ballot and a pre-registration for volunteering. So we had about 750,000 email addresses at that point, and those 2 processes took us to over 5 million, and also people signed in to be part of the Olympic Torch Relay. So then we had quite a significant database, but it took me quite a long time just to convince the business that this data was actually going to be useful to them, partly because different parts of the business wanted to kind of hold on to their own, which became quite a big challenge. But we didn't really grasp that one properly until the last 18 months when we brought in something more like a proper CRM system, and a team then to manage that. And that became a hugely important tool for us because most of our most effective direct communication was actually by email. Even though we had a healthy and busy website, that was our main tool for the direct communication to the public. So that's our internal tool, and our kind of capacity and ability to mine that and deal with that is one issue. Second was external stuff. So what could we do to understand the market conditions around us, which I suppose that the 2 important areas for us in that. One was, especially towards the time, well, there's the general context for marketing when we had to understand, for example, people's willingness to volunteer, and we did do some external research. We had Nielsen as one of our sponsors and partners, so we did quite a lot of active studies. We did a study every month about how the games were seen and how it was viewed. Most of that was sort of standard offline qualitative work, but we also took other soundings. The 2 things that became very important to us, one was social media, particularly during the games. I know that you've been just talking about that in the last session, and people's responses and reactions, and I can talk a bit about how we work with tools around that in a second. And the other was around understanding sort of online behaviors, which helped us build some of our products, and I'll show you a slide in a second on that. And then I think the last area which started to have an impact for us was our own analytics around our website, but that actually, the challenge for a lot of our web analytics is, although we had a lot of data, and by the end, a lot of data, because we had 100 million people looking at our website over the time of the games, it's quite difficult on a day-to-day basis to do much about that, because some things can take 6 months to change, especially if you have an approval process. And of course, by the time we got to our final delivery, we only had 16 days. There's not a lot you can do. But we did find a lot of value in real-time data and real-time data analysis, and use tools like Chartbeat, and to some extent live Google Analytics, to show what people were looking at on our site and move assets around according to time of day, what people were looking at, and so on. But one area I think that you sort of might not expect me to talk about, if I can work out.
Can you say again,
right.
when you say, how many people visit the
112 million.
100 million.
112 million over the period of the games, and 15 million app downloads, 5 million social followers. But all those numbers came in really at the time of the games. Up to that point, we had 2 million followers on social media, a database of 5, and probably 500,000 to 1 million people visiting the site on a daily basis. So that's the impact of the games, and it's part of the whole mix of people wanting to find out. But actually, a really important thing for us was so there are the numbers and the ramp up. So you can see the ramp up's massive. It's quite interesting. I know it's a different discussion, that 60% of visits across all of our mobile and non-mobile services were from mobile. 50% of visits to our website during weekends were from mobile. So anyway, that's something different. But one thing that we did do, because we realized we had a challenge that although everyone, or a lot of people, had heard of the games, they weren't necessarily thinking about us as a supplier of consumer information. Yes, sure, for schedules and things that have gone wrong and stuff like that, but not necessarily for your consumer experience of what's going on, who's involved, photos, news, all this sort of stuff. And certainly web-based, we knew that'd be a huge challenge for us, because we had some major, effectively, competitors in all the rights holders, which tend to be the biggest broadcasters in every one of the 180 or more territories where the games is broadcast. So one of our challenges was how could we make ourselves visible? And actually, we did a lot of work on search engine optimization. We assembled 2 years out a database of 1,700 top keywords that were most searched for around the games, partly through standard research, because Google lets you into that information because they want you to buy search keywords, but also by some historical research. As a result of which, by the time we got to the games, this is a kind of inverse chart, because being at the bottom is good. Being at the bottom, as we were by the time of the games, we were on average the number 2 listing for every one of these 1,700 terms in the UK, against the BBC that was 12. Now, the BBC have a footprint of around 10 million people who come to their website pretty much every day. We had maybe 500,000 at that point, but we ended up delivering 3 times the BBC's traffic, and we didn't even have video assets like they did. So a similar picture in the US, where we were very strong against NBC and other competitive sites and Yahoo. So the net result was that we had a huge amount of delivery of traffic from search. Something like 66% of our traffic came from search. And that was based on understanding what people were looking for and making sure we structured our site around that. We did have the benefit that we were building our site from scratch, but we also had some interesting learnings, which is, again, a kind of form of big data research. So in English, and our site was provided in English and French, we discovered that people look for, in Britain, we talk about a medal table as the listing of all the people who've won medals, all the countries. In other countries, in international English, that's actually medal count. Yeah. So we had to change from medal table to medal count. And we had some support from, it helped that we had some support from Google Doodles and Google Positioning.
Have you received some specific help from Google or
Not
other player on the SEO topic?
No, not really. I mean, Google produced Google Doodles, which they do for big events, which was helpful to us. But they didn't give us any particular insight as to what they were going to be and what they were going to point at. And although they produced special, what they call their knowledge panels, these search boxes you can see on the right, it is on the right. But actually, Google don't give you a lot of insight, and a lot of our experience working particularly with the social networks is they don't give you a lot of insight, but often they don't have a lot of insight because they're not always quite clear how people are using their own services, or at least where sometimes they might tell you things that they're not going to make you party to them. But in fact, working with Twitter in particular, there was very little insight. We had great relationships, but we ended up building a lot of stuff through our own research and intuition.
Okay. You want to move on the Okay, maybe we turn to you, Michael, and you want to give us
Sure.
an update, and you show us the good and the bad, or the good and maybe
well,
something you want.
it's for anyone to decide. Well, I don't think there's
What I mean is that
there's
you
a
are,
good and bad, but there's
you're,
definitely
you're able to talk about your success and sometimes things that you want to do better.
Yeah, I think it's for different purpose and different target audience, but at least I want to share with you two of the routes that we are trying and use to visualize data with marketers. So just maybe to introduce myself a little bit before, so I look after digital and CRM for the region. As Sonia, one of my colleagues, Kraft Foods, who talked this morning, we're going under a little bit of a reorganization within Kraft to follow consumer behaviors, and I'm going to lean into looking into social CRM, and therefore big data is very close to my heart because it's very important that we, link those behaviors into tangible benefits for marketing and for our brands, and how this can contribute to our business and how this can generate, incremental revenue. And we've really the vision and the ambition to turn CRM into something that generates some profit. So moving from a function that is more there to consult or to educate or to elevate capabilities versus turning it into a profit center rather than a cost center. And data is definitely a way to do it. So the things that I wanted to share with you today is the first route is really an example of a pilot that we ran for one of our brand, Tassimo. I don't know if we can pull up the slides.
We're gonna roll the
there.
slides.
So what we try and do is actually source and aggregate a lot of different source of information coming from either online advertising or online sales, because on Tassimo we have an e-shop and we sell online our capsules and different ranges of product, and other source of information such as web traffic or the sentiment on our brands, and the different performance across all the activities that we do. It's going to be difficult at some point to just talk over my few words and not having the slides. But anyway, so you would understand all those type of sources of information.
Could we have the
and
slides,
trying
please?
to
Someone?
really aggregate that. And then we created a tool that looks like the perfect tool, which has all the different countries laid down with the performance of each of those different level of information. And that's very detailed, and that's very actionable, that's personalizable, sizable, whatever shape and form, background, you can use it. But when you link back to my first comment when I was asked what is actually the number one priority, is the lack of understanding, the lack of expertise, and then you struggle to make that work for marketing, because then they see the point, but they don't really see how to action it because they are overloaded with information. And in that instance, too much information ends into a kind of an analysis paralysis, and then nothing happens.
I'm always surprised by that, and I'm still surprised by that, because I'm always surprised when we say that we lack some education on the way we can use data and the visualization. It seems so obvious. It seems so obvious to visualize information. What the marketers are lacking. There is something I don't understand. I'm a bit provocative, but
they're lacking time. So I think they're lacking time.
Because they have this, right?
This is the dashboard that we use, and very comprehensive. You can track everything from the volume of your online sales to the performance of your online advertising to the sentiment behind your brand. To the number of fans, to the engagement rate that you have, even the redemption rate that you have on your CRM program, on your coupons that you're putting on your CRM program. So you pretty have access to everything, and then on top you have tabs per country. But again, analysis paralysis and lack of time and lack of expertise and understanding is often leading to no action. So you end up, investing in a very solid tool, but you haven't spent enough time in just making sure you use that and use that as a communication vehicle, or at least you adapt the tool to be communicated effectively. And that leads to my second point, which is another view, another route that we use. And just a joke and a quote about Andy Warhol that says, "I never read, I just look at pictures." And it's very true for me, but I think it's very true for a lot of people. And there's a kind of a generation Pinterest where people are really looking into quick things and infographics and instant view on things so that they can action it. And we actually leverage that insight to create dashboards or at least snapshots of performance that are immediately actionable. And therefore, the example that I wanted to bring now is the exact same business, which is Tassimo Business, with the help of one of our strategic partners, Proximity BBDO, which is one of our strategic key agency, working with them and just making sure we not only work on the tool itself, but also on the way it's going to be communicated and how it's going to impact the business. Mm-hmm. And therefore, we produce those snapshots of performance on a monthly basis, just to make sure the information taken out of the tool, because the tool actually is behind, is effectively communicated within marketing teams. But and that we apply into those guys that are more, closer to the generation Pinterest rather than and infographics. Well, actually, we used to look at white papers and infographics. Actually, a new version of white papers, from my perspective.
It looks great. It looks great. But on the other hand, it looks like less dynamic than what we saw before.
Sure.
It looks like something that is more a snapshot, and maybe you won't have exactly the same figures for day to day or hour by hour, and it looks like there is a lot of artistic view on this, but less data. Is it right?
But again, it's linked to the objective that you have with the data and
used.
the people that will action the data. If, to my experience, and on that particular case, targeting marketers and to make it actionable, this type of deliverable works better, even though, real-time management of data and performance, managing the performance is highly needed. But on that particular objective, it was just matching the performance against the objective. Mm-hmm. The type of view matches better the objective and impact the business more as well.
What can be the update of the number of updates in a year? This kind of document. It's not a one shot. That's something that you.
Well, it depends. It depends on the brand, the size of the brand.
Yeah,
when
sure.
Tassimo is the most, and for Kraft in Europe is the most advanced digital, the most advanced brands when it comes to activated digital, social, and CRM. Therefore, we put a lot of energy behind it. So that comes on a regular basis, on a monthly basis. But for some other brands, it might come less often. And that doesn't prevent, people in a team like Tassimo who are dedicated to digital, social, CRM to still use the other tool because they are dedicated to that. They are specialists. They have the knowledge. But for others, maybe they are bosses or the marketing director or the category director, a view like that works better. There's just another example I wanted to share about Carte Noire, which is a similar approach and a different style, still in the coffee business, but different style of it.
Infographics, nice, very nice. Alex, do you have the kind of
nice and effective?
Nice and effective. Sorry, you're right. Do you have same kind of experience on bringing data into a view that is maybe less formal, less dynamic, but more punchy, and easy to consume for the marketers?
Or very much so, or just for the business in general. I mean, the truth was that at the most senior level of the business, especially when we had, when information got up to our very senior board, because we had a board full of people who were as much figureheads, who were kind of above our executive board. And for them, really, even when we reported back that we'd had $1 billion this or $1 billion that, or even that we were, you know, a global trend on Twitter, I think they all pretended they knew what that meant, but they didn't. And the only numbers that really made sense were when we had to do one of two things. One was to always put it in context and say, you know, as we moved through the months, right, we have more traffic now than Chelsea, we have more traffic than Tesco, whatever then they started to sort of get a sense of that. But actually the only number that they could all universally rally around was our e-commerce numbers, and that wasn't the whole point of our delivery. But yeah, so keeping it, I think by the end, I would say, I may not be the best judge, but I would say that my team had huge credibility in the business because we were seen to be hardworking and efficient. And I spent a lot of time communicating. In fact, to the kind of rank and file staff, my trademark became to send round an email with a deck, a very visual deck of what we were doing. Not quite as pretty as this, but actually expecting no one to do anything more than read the email. And it became a sort of in-joke that the email, every time I got a bit more silly with it and started doing song lyrics or started doing advertising rip-off or whatever it was, because then that would guarantee that people would wait for it and be entertained. It did mean that in the last year, with, you know, by the last year, we had sort of 50 to 100 people joining our business every Monday, and then I'd get emails back saying, what's this? I don't understand. What are you talking about? Or why have you sent me this crazy email? But people enjoyed that, and it at least gave them some incentive to see the information. But I think that in truth, the only three areas where I think we worked well and effectively in analyzing data and making it actionable, or maybe there's four areas. There was SEO, there was monitoring social media, but even that for the purposes of our communications team, who were very hard-pressed and pushed around by the media every day, all they really got out of that was not all the different metrics about who was talking about what, because they kind of knew what was going on. It was more just about context. So when a journalist rang and said, you're doing something wrong because I saw it on Twitter 2 minutes ago, they could go back and say, well, interesting you say that, but 10 times more people are actually talking about David Beckham's hairstyle, so calm down. But
this is all about context.
So for them, it was all about context rather than too much detail. But I think we did a solid job in SEO. We did a solid job in social media monitoring. We did a lot of work around user testing. We did about 2,000 hours of user testing, which and some of that was based on insights from what our analytics was telling us. Some of it was sort of direct stuff. And we did a reasonable amount of work in CRM, and by the end we sent 83 million mails during the games in 150 different varieties based on different preferences. But I think the challenge for all of us, and I don't know how many people in the room are marketeers, but even if you're in communications in digital or you're selling stuff, I think is to start to move towards a model where you see the economic value of every customer, and you see the economic value not just of your core transactions where people are buying stuff, but all the mini transactions that lead towards that. The number of times, can you tell how much time is this customer spending with you and what are they doing, and does that lead into a buying habit? And actually something that I kick myself, I wish I'd done, having had a bit more breathing room since the games to think about what can be done in this space, is just to do some goal analysis around. We had a publications team that delivered 2,500 publications, all glossy, and they worked crazily hard, and all to a very high specification.
Like post blogs and...
these were all like sort of magazines or leaflets or all sorts of different things.
All kind of publications.
All for, some for teams, some for sports federations, some for the media, some for government, whatever they might be. And they tried as far as possible to push people towards PDFs and downloads. Now, if I'd done the one simple thing of putting a goal tracker in our analytics to say every time someone downloads, that is worth, and you can ask the publications team, how much does that cost you per unit to publish that, print that? Fine. And I could have reported back to management, today we have made, £20,000 because of these downloads. And actually, you can start to ascribe those values to lots of, for example, every video you show, well, someone in your marketing team will know how much it costs per video view for their television output, put the same video creative on your site, gold track it, put a number against it, report that back to management, and suddenly you start to see some real value. And I think that there's a lot of room in that. All I can say is that, you know, we did what we did, and what I found, why I think this is a challenge for everyone, is that when we did do work in SEO, when we did do work around user testing, we made massive improvements, not just absolute improvements, but relative to our competition too. So I don't think people are doing this a lot. I don't think they're doing it well. And I think that, you know, if you sit on your hands too long, one of your competitors is going to. So, you know, things are measurable, and it's now increasingly our responsibility to make sense of that and make good business out of it.
I understand. Michael, could you tell us what is really a new challenge in this topic? Because we had the question of having a lot of data, and this is not completely new. It is the volume of data that is changing. It is this data obesity. It is the way we can treat this data, the new consumers of data. What is your perspective on this?
I think. Hello. Yeah. I would say the unstructured data is the biggest challenge, because
unstructured data, because before we had like tables of data.
People used to say, yeah, 10% is structured and then 90% is unstructured, and that's growing. And that's where people would actually ask us the more details about. So that's the first challenge, I would say. And then the second challenge is all those questions that we're asking us, you know, being subject matter experts about digital, which is a rather new media. And those questions being directed to us only versus, you know, more traditional medium, which are not measured that effectively. And we're always asking more and more to us versus others which are not really solid in their approach as well. So I think this is another challenge.
Who can be the others when it comes to data?
I think, you know, it's a challenge also to the industry and to all the players that are in that industry to try and make that discussion move also a little bit. Because sometimes in digital, you're sometimes paralyzed by that question. And sometimes the analysis of the performance costs more than doing things, actually. And that prevents people from being iterative and doing a lot of test and learn, just because they need to prove every single thing before even trying to do so. And digital is moving so fast that if we don't iterate and if we don't try and sometimes fail, we will never learn. So I think we need to move away and push back a little bit on some of those questions in order to progress.
And I think the key thing is that we have got to a point now, you know, most European markets, westernized markets, reached the point in 2010 where the majority of people were using broadband, or the kind of late majority of people were using broadband. So now it is likely, I mean, effectively all our consumer transactions around the games were digital by default. So now that you've reached the point that the majority of consumers are consuming a way which is definitely measurable, not panel research for television or radio, it's measurable. That, you know, that's why if there isn't a demand, there's going to be to do more effective stuff with that. I mean, if we can't get that right, somebody will, and somebody will get competitive advantage out of it.
Last question, and then we turn to the audience for questions. Tools. Do you see new offers in terms of tools? Do you believe that we need new tools? And when I say tools, I mean really something that is provided by new companies or companies that are in the business intelligence and provide new tools for data visualization. Do you have what you are expecting as specialists, or you think that we have to wait to have the right offer in the market? Briefly, and then we turn to the audience.
I think there's a lot of tools, and there are less good service to analyze and communicate and vehicles the tools. And we have a lot of tools, and historical tools and new tools that are coming in. We should not neglect the part of
the surveys and then how to
understanding
use
what
them.
the tools bring and making digestible for each of the target that we have. So I think the focus for me might be more on trying to look at what we have and trying to take the best tools that we already have and communicate in a way that is digestible and actionable. I think there are all other existing tools that are really worth looking at, but for the moment I'd say we already have a lot of information within our groups.
So tools is not an issue, it's more the way we are using it.
I think that's right. So. I think that there are a lot of tools out there, and there are a lot of people trying to sell software as a service, as a one-size-fits-all tool, but actually they don't really understand the business context of what the tools are for. So it's more about making proper use of them. Otherwise, you just get more data. I think probably the most useful tools are ones that actually help you manage stuff rather than the reporting at the moment. There's not many things that I see straight out the box. I think, great, that satisfies a need. You've still got to work with them and interpret them.
Okay, thank you. We have like 4 or 5 minutes for question in the audience. So if someone has a question about data visualization and how we use the data for the marketers. Someone?
Nope. Comments?
Loïc.
Yes.
Hello. Hello, Michael. I'm Sonia, and I'm also from Kraft.
We work together.
I'm going to
Well, so far.
Just going back to... You want me to stand up? No, that's not... we're talking before about the data, the shonky data that we get from other channels, and I was interested to know if you could expand on that. Like, what's the worst... bit of data that's thrown at you about other media channels that you really roll your eyes at, and you were saying that we in digital get asked for data in a way that other marketeers don't at all. So just to expand on that a little bit.
Can you just summarize the question, because I think the mic was not that okay.
I think it was. The thing that always, I have a friend who was, I won't name the agency, but who was CTO of a large agency, and he always laughs that when he first went into a meeting, and the classic client relationship is you've won the client's business, they bring in a budget, let's say it's €1 million, and you sit down to do some campaign planning, and he's rubbing his hands thinking, great, there's some real digital activity here, and the media planners tell him, oh, we've already spent all the money, or 85% of it, because we've already bought our budget, which is all going to be these incredibly effective offline and TV channels that we happen to have some large discounts with as well and need to offload on the client. So, that's also moving into the area of media planning, but there's never, there isn't the same challenge for the spending of budget in certainly in the UK, the panel research we have in TV and radio feels suspect or light compared to the solid data you can definitely get out of digital. And although half of our spend in the UK is on search marketing, so there is a lot of move towards digital spend, there is a big disconnect. There has to be, because that data just isn't real. I think that's where digital people need to step up a bit and make the case more strongly. But yeah, as you said, it's only the digital people that are being challenged around that. It's not the TV and radio guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I think people are fine and looking at GRPs and impression versus in digital social CRM. People would ask you, what is your reach, but what was your transformation? How did it lead to a sale, and where, and how, and what gender, and which city, and all this type of information that you can get, but you just wonder why you go to that extent and to those details versus everybody's fine at just looking at the volume of impressions or GRPs and not finding that and finding that super effective, even though people are doing something else while the TV commercial is passing by. So.
Okay. So, if there is another question, if not...
Thank you very much.
So you can give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.